In this video, I'm going to talk to you about ways that you can paint with your toddler. I'm going to go over materials that you can use, paper, paintbrushes, paint, locations, space in your home that might work really well and others that may not. I'll give you a few suggestions about what you can teach, and cleanup, which is, a very fun and stress-free process. My name is Beth Gatza, and I am an artist that lives in Los Angeles, California with my husband and almost 2.5-year-old daughter. Pre-pandemic, I was a private school art teacher, and I've taught every age from ages 3 through adult. So I'm hoping that I can share some tips with you to make this a fun process for both you and your toddler. Let's begin with the space that you want to paint in, because I know that this may be the biggest reason that is stopping you from painting with your toddler. You might have a home that you've taken a lot of time to decorate and keep clean, and the thought of painting with a toddler might just give you total anxiety, and I get that. So here are a few obvious suggestions. The first one is paint outside. Now I know not everybody has an outside space, but if you do, find a place that is close to a hose. So at the end, you can just easily hose everything down. You may even want to think about covering your concrete or your tables with a tablecloth or any surface that may get stained, because even though we're using washable paint, it can still leave stains on your surfaces and clothing. My suggestion for taking care of your concrete is something that you may already have in your home, and that's those foam pads that you use to kind of keep your kid from breaking their arms and legs. So you could lay those down, and that will do a really nice job of protecting your concrete. Where should you paint outside? Honestly, I spend the most time with my daughter painting just on the ground, and that may not seem like a fun option for you, but you have unlimited space to just kind of push everything out and see how the exploration and the painting process is going to go. I usually use a roll of paper, like one that you can get online, like a butcher paper or something from IKEA. Those all work well enough for what we're doing today. You may even want to paint on a coffee table or something that comes up to about their hip height. This way they can kind of be over and on top of it and walk around without feeling constrained or constricted. You may be interested in having them sit in their high chair. You can do that as well, but keep in mind it's not going to keep everything contained all the time. Your child is going to want to throw the paint all over the place, just like they do when eating food. Inside. All right, here comes all the stress and anxiety. I know a lot of us right now don't have the outdoor space available because at this moment in time, it's winter. There is a pandemic happening, and for a lot of reasons, there's just no option to be painting outside for you anyhow. So what is this workaround for the inside of your house? The obvious choice would be the kitchen. Thank you. You have a lot of tile, easy to clean up. Everything has been prepped already for messes. And again, just like outdoors, I love painting on the floor with my daughter. It's just the easiest way to spread out and not feel like we're constricted or constrained. You may not have walls to kind of hold everything in. One suggestion might be the child gates that you have. You can literally make a cage around you guys. So this way, if they are done painting and they get up and run, they're not gonna head to your couch and get everything messed up. Another alternative is the bathroom. And I know a lot of people might have small bathrooms like I do, but it doesn't matter the size of your bathroom. You can always even paint in the bathtub. A dry bathtub is the perfect surface to get messy, and bath time is ready to go. And speaking of bath painting, I don't know if you guys are aware, but there are soap paints made by Crayola, and I love them. They're so great. I keep them around all the time with a couple of these really chubby paintbrushes in my bathtub. So if you're someone that doesn't want to commit to a huge mess or a big painting session in your house, this would be a really great alternative to incorporate painting into your bath time play. You may have an easel, like one of those standing easels that you can get at IKEA online, or you think it's going to be a great idea because you have an easel and everything is going to be perfect. Your child's going to stand there and paint, and then you get to the day of and you have everything prepped and your child was like, no. Just keep in mind that you might have the tools available for your child, but they just may not be ready to handle it yet. It doesn't mean that they're not going to be. They just may need a little bit more time. So here is a space that we don't really talk about very often, and it's your headspace. For 5 years prior to the pandemic, I was teaching elementary age students, so ages 3 through 13. Since I was someone who had to teach every single day, you're not always going to be in your top mood, your best mood every morning or every day of the school year. So you have to kind of think about how are you going to get to a place that is good enough where you can kind of let the little stresses and the little messes and all those things just slide off of you.
Ooh. Oh. Oh, hi, sweetie. Oh, you got mama. You got mama, huh?
So make sure you have a cup of tea or coffee prior to doing this, something that's going to make you feel alert, awake, glass of water with lemon, whatever it may be, and have breakfast. And just make sure that if you are committing to this painting session, that you really kind of just go into it as best as you can with like not holding on to your expectations too much. The quickest way to get a child uninterested or, not wanting to do art is to make them feel ashamed or make them feel bad about what they're doing. So even if you set up for the day and you had this whole thing planned and you're like, we're gonna paint tomorrow, and tomorrow comes and you're not feeling ready, skip it, or maybe just push it aside a few hours until you feel like you're in a good place for it, because it will make it so much better. Timing is really important. I always paint right before my daughter's bath time. It just is so much easier. So if you only do bath time like 2-3 times a week, make sure painting day is on that day, because they are gonna wanna put it everywhere. They're gonna wanna put it on their face, their hands, because they're children and this is what they do. So it's something to expect, and just enjoy the process. And eventually they're not going to do that anymore because they've done it enough and they feel like they get it and they're gonna want it to explore something else. So another thing to consider is, what should your child wear when painting? Maybe nothing. Maybe just a diaper would be good if you're planning on doing bath time afterwards. You can use an apron as well, but again, we're talking about children here and it may not be something they really understand or get, and they just might want to take it off. Old clothing or weird clothing that you just don't mind getting stained, because even though this is washable paint, I have found it is really hard to get washable paint out of clothing, so keep that in mind. Should you play music? Well, I think so. I like playing music, but again, music is going to change their mood and their feeling, and that could be a good thing or that could be a very bad and stressful thing for you. So choose your music wisely. Classical music is always a good go-to. Lo-fi is a good alternative. I would not recommend doing high energy kind of music because it can be distracting from what they're doing. It will kind of make them want to dance and get up and move around, which can be great. But remember, choose your surroundings appropriately for that. Tools and materials. First and foremost, you must always use non-toxic paint, and you want to make sure that it is washable. Washable will be the easiest to get off of your surfaces. Paints to avoid: oil paint, acrylic paint. I would also avoid those fancy jelly gouaches that are really popular nowadays. They are fun, but your child is going to scoop all of your nice paints out and it will be gone in seconds. So make sure that you're buying something that is kind of inexpensive so you're not spending a ton of money. But most importantly, acrylic paint and oil paint should never be allowed to be around young children. But here is a little story. I've been doing this my whole life, and I made the mistake of not checking one little pan of paints one day. It was those little pop-up things, and it was next to all the washable paints, and I just didn't even check it and let my daughter just go crazy with them because they were really nice colors. She got it in her hair, she got it all over clothing, and I was like, woohoo, this is so fun, look at the art we're creating, until later I found out it was acrylic paint. And if you don't know, acrylic paint is permanent. They use a type of acrylic paint for printing on t-shirts. So I spent about 2 weeks trying to get that paint out of her hair, and it was a nightmare. And the clothing, well, they're just, it's just painting clothes now, but it doesn't wash off. So definitely keep in mind that you're looking at the paint that you're using. And here are some recommendations of paint that you can use that I do love. When your child is first starting to paint, again, you're gonna wanna stick with a thicker type, kind of like gel base paint. Finger paints that I really like are Crayola finger paints, and they are gouache paints. And gouache just means that it's more matte and opaque. So matte means it's not shiny, and opaque means that it is not see-through. So because it's matte and opaque, then the colors are extremely vibrant and really fun, and it looks really nice on your paper. So it's a great starter paint for your toddler. From there, eventually your child is going to be ready to try something a little bit more advanced. And I think the next step up would be kind of like a tempera paint that is in a pan set. So this is Saks tempera paint, and I use this in the classroom all the time. I really like the color vibrancy. It's really beautiful. They're very bright, and the artwork looks really good. This is kind of the step before working with pan watercolor paints, and the reason why is they're very big, they're kind of blocky, and just be aware that your child is probably going to try to pick up each individual block and draw with it. I mean, you can let them do it, but yeah, you're the teacher, so then eventually you're going to have to show them how to activate this paint. And how you activate it is with water, exactly like watercolor paint. The reason why I love this so much is it really does last for like ever. One of these little circle things, like honestly, in the classroom with about 500 kids per week, it did last me not only a full year, but maybe I could get 2 years out of it. The middle starts to get worn out a little bit, but if you're only having one child, you can make it last a lifetime. And they are easy to clean. So when your child starts to learn how to use watercolor paints or these tempera paints, they're going to want to mix all the colors together. So the yellow and the green and everything, and you're gonna go, what are you doing? Stop doing that. It's going to happen, so just get ready. When that's done, when they're done mixing the paint, it's actually super easy to clean up. Just get a little bit of water, paper towel, wipe it off, and they're ready to go. It's not exactly the same with pan watercolor paints, so I'm gonna actually talk about that next. The pan watercolor paints that I would use in the classroom were these, and the brand is Prang. It's a half pan watercolor tray. And what I love about this is it comes with these pop-out watercolors. So in case you run out of one, then you can just exchange it with a new one. And just so you know, it's usually the yellow one. So if you want to buy extra yellows. It also comes with a paintbrush and a mixing tray on the other side. So when your child is old enough to begin to want to start mixing paint colors together, then they have that option. I know a lot of people really also love the Crayola watercolor mixing paints, but when I bought them on Amazon, they duplicated some of the colors. So I was only really getting about 4 colors instead of like 7 or 8. That could just be an Amazon problem, not a Crayola problem. So if you're looking for it, just make sure you get a good vendor to buy from. The other one that is very popular with art teachers is Yarka. It is this tray right here. And I do like it. The colors are very beautiful, but I broke the top of the tray instantly. Actually, I can't remember. I may have broken it myself, or maybe it broke in the mail. The Prang one is so durable, it lasts forever, so that is always my go-to. I mentioned this before, but bathtub paint is the best. It is a way to integrate play and painting into your bath time fun or whatever, and you don't have to worry about it ruining any of your expensive or beautifully decorated items in your home. This is another great alternative to finger painting because it is soap, so you can just squeeze it right under little fingers, and if they put it on themselves, then they're actually getting clean. Just make sure that your child does not have any skin issues, and if they do, to always do an allergy test prior to playing with these paints. Paintbrushes. In the beginning, your child will not be ready for paintbrushes, so you may want to hold off on paintbrushes until you feel like your child is ready to step it up to the next level. I mean, come on, they're children. But if you want to have something ready to go, these Chubby Wubby paintbrushes are so awesome. I have a few in the bathroom just for her bathtub paints, and I really love to use these with the gouache finger paints as well as the Saks tempera palette. Both of them work really well and are fun, and I like that they're very firm bristles on the end, because what you'll begin to notice is when your child is playing with paintbrushes, they are not going to want to brush, they're just going to want to jam it as hard as they can into the paper, and they're going to want to dig out all the watercolor paint, and they think that it's like the gouache paint, you know, that they were using before, and they're just gonna wanna put it everywhere. So it's up to you now to show them how it works. And how I would do that in the classroom is I would just do a quick demonstration and say, here's a paintbrush. These are the bristles. And here is a metal thing that is very hard. So watch how nice it looks when you just gently use the paintbrush by brushing the surface of your paintbrush onto the paper. Now watch what happens when I jam it into the paper. Some of the kids would be like, oh, cool, I'm gonna do that. But what usually ends up happening is everyone's like, no, please don't do that. You're hurting the paintbrush. And be like, oh, I'm so sorry. How can we fix this? You know, it's with children, you're like, this thing has feelings, right? So you can kind of use that to your advantage to kind of teach them about how to use the paintbrush or how to not use it inappropriately. But if you're not aware, round brushes, which are like these, they come to a tip, are really great for watercolors. And the reason why is because they hold a lot of water in this area right here. And when you put the paintbrush on the paper, it's going to release the fluid, the water, from the point. So you're not going to want to use something like this, a flat brush with watercolor paint. This would work really well with the gouache finger paints, or you can even use this with your tempera paints as well. But actual watercolor paint, you probably wouldn't want to use this too much because the child will be too tempted to just dig the paint out like this. That actually leads me to the next point. I really love these Royal paintbrushes. I had a bunch of them in the classroom. They have a really nice rubbery side to hold onto the paintbrush, and it's fun for them to squeeze. They work really well with watercolor paints, and yeah, they're great. If you're unsure what paintbrushes you should get, just get a variety pack. There's so many mix sets out there. This way, if you're not like an experienced painter, then the best bet is to test it out for yourself and see what works best for you as the teacher. How about painting trays, or what do you put your paint on? Now I use egg cartons. I had paint trays in the classroom. I know a lot of people would probably want those no spill paint cups with the lid on the top. I had those in the classroom, but here's the problem with that one, especially with young kids. You fill it up with your paint, you put the lid on, and yep, if it tips over, it's not gonna spill out, and that's wonderful. You can put a lid on it and store it, all is great and well. And then day of painting comes and you put them out, you take the lid off, your child dips their paintbrush into the blue paint and then immediately dips it into the yellow paint. And then all of your yellow paint is now green tinged, you know, because they just mixed all your paints together. So the best bet is to kind of just paint or use the paint that you want as you go, a little bit at a time. And if you have to throw a little bit away at the end, who cares? You know, it's not a big deal. It's better than kind of wasting your entire paint supply on the first go. Paper. Okay, paper is a fun subject for me to talk about because I think throughout the years I've learned a lot being an art teacher about what works and what does not work. So hopefully I can save you some pain and frustration. So first of all, copy paper, which you may have available. Yeah, you can paint on copy paper. The only thing is though, is when you're painting on copy paper, it's going to absorb a lot of the moisture into the paper. So you're not gonna get any of the cool effects that you would have with like watercolor paper. For instance, a wet on wet effect is like when you apply just water onto watercolor paper. You could take other types of paint and dip it onto that water and it spreads and becomes like this cool tie-dye effect. If you tried to do that on copy paper, it just wouldn't work. You would probably just wet the paper, it would soak that water up, you put the paint on the paper, and it would just go exactly like a little bit of a daub right where you left it. That's nice, it's not like a big deal, but another thing to consider is that because copy paper is so thin, it's not meant for water, that it's very easy to rip. So if that's not a problem for you, or if you're kind of like trying to keep your budget, you know, small, then use copy paper, use toilet paper, use whatever you want. Like honestly, don't use toilet paper actually, but paper towel might be okay. But what I'm getting at here is paint just to paint. If you're just gonna paint on your hand for the day, just do that. The roll of paper. This is very similar to copy paper, but I found that rolls of paper, like the ones from IKEA I really like, or There's another one on Amazon that I'll list below, but they're a little bit thicker than copy paper. And I do love that when I'm outside or I'm in a place where I can roll the paper out, she kind of has this challenge of filling the space, because you may find that when you put a piece of paper in front of your child, they do like one little stroke of, like one little thing, and they're like, I'm done. I want a new sheet of paper. And you're like, no way. So you can kind of avoid that by having this long roll, and then it just becomes more of a challenge for them to kind of complete. Also, what's really nice is when you're done filling up a space, you can kind of just roll it as you go, kind of like a scroll. So it kind of keeps the mess to a minimum. True Ray paper. Okay, so True Ray paper is a type of construction paper that we art teachers use in the classroom all the time. And the reason why we love this so much is because it's not that much more expensive than regular construction paper. But if you are an art teacher and you get regular construction paper and you want to do a painting project, you put the paper down, the kid gets the construction paper wet for like 1 millisecond and just it like falls apart. And you're like, no, I did not plan for this. My day is, like my whole teaching thing is ruined for the day. The reason why art teachers love True Ray is that does not happen. It's like, it says heavyweight, fade resistant, which is not really true. I've had a lot of projects fade in the sunlight, but that's besides the point. Heavyweight though. It's heavyweight enough that if you paint on it, it's not going to fall apart. And it does a pretty good job of keeping your colors vibrant, but not as good as watercolor paper. And that leads me to talking about why you should get watercolor paper just right away. Student grade watercolor paper is inexpensive. You could go to Michael's and find any kind of student grade watercolor paper, and they have all different varieties. And it's always going to be better than a copy paper or something like that when you're doing water-based painting. It's just a nice heavyweight material, and it's not that expensive, not that much more expensive. The point really is to play, to explore, and to have fun. And if you feel like making the investment for watercolor paper as they get older instead of when they're younger, yeah, that perfect, right? Another cool option that I really love is going to the Dollar Tree or 99-cent store, some kind of thrifty store, and finding coloring books. And I love this because the gouache paint is still transparent enough where you can see through like the paint to the coloring pages. So it feels like they're doing a really fast job of coloring it. Again, if it's wet and you flip the page, it's going to stick to the other side. So if you want to rip a few out prior to that, you can, or like who cares, just let it stick and then flip a few pages and start there. And that's what I wanted to talk about next is what do you teach your child when you're painting? And the answer to that is nothing. Don't. Try not to teach at all with a child this age, especially if it's their first time painting. You may have this idea of it being some like Montessori dreamscape where you're doing circles and triangles and all this stuff. You're going to learn about color theory and color mixing. They don't care. At that age, they really don't care. What they want to do is just figure it out on their own. And what you can do as the teacher is kind of plan for that. And if you want them to learn about color mixing, then only give them the primary colors. And then this way, when they start mixing them together, they can see the changes for themselves. If you want them to learn about circles, then put a couple circular like plastic shapes out there, maybe something from their Play-Doh kit or like something, like a cookie cutter or some kind of shape like that where they're going to want to use that tool to kind of play. Actually, the best thing that you can do is kind of work on your own thing, and they're going to be watching you, and they're going to be seeing how you use your paintbrush, how you paint your circles, and how you do everything that you wanted to teach them, and they're going to learn that lesson just by watching you. Some things to expect. First of all, we talked about it. They're going to want to put their hands in it. They're going to want to put their hair in it. They're probably going to want to eat it.
Yucky.
Just make sure it's non-toxic and tell them, no, we're not going to do that, okay? Like I said before, another thing that they're going to do is they're going to want to mix all the colors together. It's just going to happen. They will also want to dig all your watercolor paints out like this. And it's so fun to watch. And I'm not sure if your child is at talking age yet or not, but what I would really try to avoid is when they show you their artwork, try really hard not to say, what is that? because that can kind of lead to a little bit of shame and them being like, oh, I didn't realize it was supposed to be anything. So what I would maybe do instead is say, wow, that is so beautiful. Can you tell me about it? And maybe they say, oh, I really love the color pink, so I did this all over here. Or maybe they say, oh, it's this, it's actually something. And you're like, wow. So if you allow them to express how they're feeling about their creation, if you allow them to tell a story about their creation, then it becomes an experience of fun, openness, where they get to express themselves instead of feeling any kind of shame about like what they're doing, which no child should feel shame, because really that's where the art fun stops. And I know this because I've heard it from so many adults that say, oh, I really wish that I stuck with painting or I stuck with art, but I had this one teacher or I had a parent, and that's where it stopped. So keep that in mind when you're doing this experience with your child, that just go with the flow as much as you can. And I know that at times it's not going to be perfect. Trust me, I do get that. But just do your best. If you're looking for some fun art YouTube videos after this whole painting experience is done, maybe you guys had a great time and you want to keep the art thing going, the things that I would show my children or my students in art class that they loved, especially the younger pre-K, kindergarten age, was the 3 Primary Colors song, the Roy G. Biv song, and Art with Mati and Dada. They're little cartoons and they're only about 7 minutes long. So it's a short little excerpt about artists throughout history. And in our household, it's the last thing that my child watches before book and bed. Cleaning and water, like what kind of water cups should you use? So I have something like this. It's flat, it's not gonna break. You don't want any glass or porcelain or anything that is going to cut your child or create a huge mess bigger than the one you should already be anticipating. Anything that is gonna be safe, and flat is really good because it helps prevent it from tipping over. I also really love those suction cup bowls that you use when you're like teaching children. I actually still use them. Like, what am I talking about? Like the suction cup bowls, you know what I'm talking about. Those are really great because it sticks to your surface. So it's really handy. You can also use those no spill containers that I was talking about earlier, the ones with the cap on top. But keep in mind that if you're using it for water, that's fantastic. But if you're using it for paint, it may not go well for you because you're gonna wanna mix all the paints together. How do you clean your paintbrushes? If you're using washable paint, the great thing is water is enough. You can always use a little bit of dish soap, or you can use like a drop of your fruit and vegetable wash. And if you are outside, a big recommendation is just to keep a little bucket of sand or kitty litter, and you can just pour your paint directly into that so you're not contaminating the environment. Accidents and how to prepare for them. So some things that are going to happen is your child will be done when they are done. They're not going to say, oh, I think I'm almost getting ready to the end of painting. They're going to go, done. They're going to get up, and whatever they are doing, whatever they're wearing, however much paint they have on them, they're going to get up and they're going to try to run. They're going to want to touch everything, all the white surfaces, the walls, the couches. So prepare. If you do get any paint on your carpet, a couch, do not rub it in right away. The thing that has always worked really well for me is some kind of club soda, fizzy water, something that is clear with a lot of fizz that you can pour onto it and try to get the bubbles to bring it to the surface where you can pat it. If it's really not coming out, rent one of those wet vacs from Home Depot, or if you have a wet vac, that works really well. Just always keep paper towels, rags, shop wipes, whatever it may be on hand while you're painting, and that will pretty much prevent all of the big messes as you go. So I think that's it. I know it's a lot of information that I provided for you, and hopefully I didn't deter you from painting, but I gave you enough information so you feel prepared and you're ready to have a lot of fun with your toddler. And if you are looking for painting classes, I will be launching my own courses for adults in early 2022. So I will post a link for those classes below when they launch. Thank you again for hanging out with me, and have a great time. I'll see you later. Take care. Bye.